ever needed forgiveness? Or have you ever needed to forgive someone else maybe? Or maybe there's a position in your life where you've got friends or you've got family and they're fighting and they need to forgive each other. At some point, we will probably all go through one of those roles in forgiveness. So, we all will eventually do that. So I'm going to talk to you today about how we can fill those roles in forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't just important in our families and friends. It's important in the church, in the whole world. And we see that importance and the roles in forgiveness in the book of Philemon. So let's talk about the three men and the three roles that they play and how to fill those roles with us. The first role we find to play in forgiveness is found with Oneismus. And if you'll read with me in verse 10, it says, I appeal to you for my child Oneismus, whose father I became in my imprisonment. So Oneismus is a servant of Philemon, and Oneismus, he decides he wants to leave home and run away. And he meets Paul and becomes a Christian, and then Paul sends him back home. And so that kind of reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son. You all know the parable of the prodigal son. When the son gets home, the son asks for forgiveness. That's the first part that we've got to do. He's got to ask for forgiveness. And so that had to be hard for Oneismus just to leave Paul and go back home because he didn't know what Philemon was going to do. Philemon could have done anything he wanted to do to Oneismus. Back then, he had the right that he could have killed Oneismus if he wanted to. So I would bet he would be scared. And so that's going the extra mile right there. He's going the extra mile and risking his life with Philemon to make things right. The next role in forgiveness we find is found with Philemon. If you read with me in verse 17, it says, So if you consider me your partner, receive him as you would receive me. So Philemon, he's a Christian. He knows Paul. He's friends with Paul. And this also kind of reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son. When the son gets home, the father accepts him willingly back into his home. He doesn't throw him back out. He accepts him. And that's what Paul's saying here he needs to do with Oneismus. He needs to accept him back home. And so Philemon's role to play is he has to give forgiveness to Oneismus. And so that's going the extra mile. Not doing what was easiest and just getting rid of Oneismus is doing the right thing and getting his hands dirty. Because we all have to fill our roles in forgiveness no matter what they are. The next role in forgiveness we find to play is Paul. And if you'll read with me in verse 11, it says, Formerly he was useless to you, but now he is indeed useful to you and to me. And then if you'll jump down to verse 13, it says, I would have been glad to keep him here with me, in order that he might serve me on your behalf and during my imprisonment in the gospel. So Paul, he's currently in Rome in prison. And he says, I would have loved Oneismus to stay here with me, and I could have sent him out to tell the world about Jesus. But that's not the right thing to do, so I'm sending him home. And this also kind of reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son again. Because the older brother, he doesn't want the father and son to get acquainted again. Well, Paul's doing right the opposite of that. We need to be more like Paul, not the older brother. And so if you'll read with me in verse 18, it says, If he has wronged you at all or owes you anything, charge that to my account. So Paul's saying, I don't care what in the world Oneismus has done to you. Whatever he did, I'll take care of it. Because that's what's important, is that you forgive him. And so think about it like this, is Paul, you've got this big canyon, and you've got Philemon on one side and Oneismus on the other side. And Paul's kind of in between them both saying, I'm going to build you a bridge to get to each other. because that's the right thing to do. Because we all have to fill our roles in forgiveness. All of our roles are important, no matter when they are or where they are. We might be struggling with a role that we have to play today. We may need forgiveness, and if we do, we have to go the extra mile and ask for forgiveness and be able to be forgiven. Maybe you're one who needs to give forgiveness to someone else. Well, we need to go that extra mile and forgive the person who needs forgiveness, because that's the right thing to do. Or if you can help others find forgiveness with each other, we have to do all we can to do that, because that's the right thing to do. Because for the sake of the church and the gospel, we all have to fill our roles in forgiveness.